welcome to this series of videos on philosophy for the lockdown and beyond. By this point in the lockdown, you might be feeling a little bit fed up with the things that you usually do, and you might be looking for something new, so philosophy could be it. Most people who discover philosophy quite enjoy it, so I'm hoping you're going to be one of these people. In this very first video, we're going to talk about what is philosophy. My name is Nassika, and I am indeed a philosopher, so what is involved in that? Now, you'll be interested in this video if you've never studied philosophy before. If you've already studied philosophy, it'll be a little bit basic for you. You might want to wait until other videos come online to find something more suitable for you. And this video has no age limit. It's mainly aimed at adults, but older children might be interested in it. So if you're 16 and over, I think you'll be perfectly fine with it. There's really no lower age limit, even if you're younger than 16 and you think it might be interesting, listen to it and see what happens. Okay, so what does it mean to be a philosopher? Usually when I tell people that I'm a philosopher, it's a complete conversation killer. They have absolutely nothing to say in response, especially in countries where philosophy is not studied at school level and people don't know what it is. A lot of people assume that I might be a psychologist, and some of them are a little bit worried that I might be able to read their minds. Now, this is a reasonable worry. I'm quite worried when I speak to psychologists as well, because they study human behaviour, and I'm always on guard when I talk to a psychologist, because I'm thinking, are they studying the way I'm behaving? Are they drawing conclusions about the kind of person that I am from this conversation? So that's psychologists. Philosophers are completely different. Sometimes we work with psychologists, but what we do is completely different from what they do. So what is philosophy? To figure this out, I want you to think about friendships. Now I'm going to ask you to pause this video, go to one side and do a little job. I know this is a little bit odd and you might be tempted to just continue watching through to see what happens, but it's really, really important that you pause the video and try and do the little job that I'm going to give you. You're going to need to trust me about this one. Okay, so what is the little job? The little job is this. I want you to go away and think about your friendships. Any friendships that you have now or friendships that you had in the past. It doesn't really matter. I want you to think about what it means to have a friend. Okay, so a friendship is some kind of relationship. Can you think of other types of relationships that are not friendships, that might be different from friendships? So do a list of other types of relationships that you can think of, as many as you can think of, and then try and think of differences between friendships and these kinds of relationships. See if that helps you to try and understand what a friendship is, and come up with a sentence or two that gives some sort of definition or account of friendship. Especially, imagine you're talking to someone who has never had a friend before, so you're trying to explain the idea to that person who has never experienced friendship. Okay. I also want you to think about your friends. Why are you friends with them? Why that particular person and not somebody else? What has ever happened when friendships have ended? What did the other person do or did not do that meant that you no longer wanted to be a friend with them? And what is it that attracts you to a particular friend in the first place? Okay, so I want you to do that. Either by yourselves, if you are by yourselves and you don't have anybody else to talk to, but ideally try to do it in a small group with other people. See if someone from your family, someone you're in lockdown with, might be willing to have these discussions with you, or call a friend on Skype or Zoom and see if they're willing to talk with you about this. If you're a group in an educational environment, you can definitely do this with other people in your class. Try to keep your groups relatively small, no more than 3 or 4 people discussing these kinds of topics. Okay, this is the bit where you need to pause the video, go away, and think about the questions I gave you. Right, sorry about this. Okay, we're back. Hopefully you've had a good think about this. What kind of other relationships did you come up with? I would imagine you came up with things like acquaintances. We often contrast acquaintances with friendships. For example, if somebody said, you know Tom, he's your friend, and you replied, oh no, he's an acquaintance. That exchange means quite a lot. It means, I don't know Tom very well. I don't particularly know anything about him, so I cannot recommend him. I can't tell you about him. I can't necessarily tell you whether he's trustworthy or helpful or all sorts of other things that we usually know about our friends. I can't vouch for him one way or another. And we don't have a special kind of connection that is involved in a friendship. So an acquaintance is much lower than a friendship. A friendship means already that the relationship is much more important. You might have thought about familial relationships. Your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, other people in your family. Now there you might have a much stronger bond. This is not like an acquaintance, somebody that you barely know. These are people that you've probably grown up with, you know quite a lot about. These are the people you go to when you have needs and when you need help. So in this sense, a familial relationship is quite close to a friendship. They are quite similar in the strength of the type of connection you have within this relationship. But still, familial relationships are different from friendships. And I'm sure most of you will have noticed that the big difference is choice. We choose our friends and we don't choose our family. In some senses, we make fun of this and we say that we're lumbered with our family because we don't have any choice. Okay? Whereas with our friends, we choose our friends. Therefore, the decision to become part of a friendship is a conscious one and one that we affirm. We're saying, I choose you. Now, why do we choose our friends? Why are we friends with this person and not another person? And can we swap our friends? Are they interchangeable in a way that it doesn't really matter who it is that you're with? I would imagine that most of you would answer no. Friends are important for themselves. And this is an important indicator of what friendship is. Friendship is targeted at that particular person because of who she is. We choose that person for a friend because of something about her that can't be changed with somebody else. Now you might say, well, that's not really true, Nafsika. Not all my friendships are like that. Some of our friends are less important than others. And that's a really good point. Not all friendships are exactly equal. If you had more than one friend, you'll probably be able to tell that some friends are more important than others. For example, I have some horsey friends because I'm horsey, right? The reason I have the horsey friends, the basis for our relationship is the horses. We kind of have an implicit agreement that we enjoy horses together. We talk about horses non-stop. In fact, the friendship seems to be based on this exchange. I give 10 minutes of talking about my horse, and then my friend is allowed to talk for 10 minutes about her horse, and we're equally interested in what each other has to say about this subject that will be completely boring to anybody who's not horsey. The relationship is based on the horses, really, not on the person. Some of these people I wouldn't be friends with if they were not horsey. And in a sense, some of these horsey friends are interchangeable with other horsey friends. I don't really mind whether I'm telling horsey friend 1 about my pony's mane rather than horsey friend 2. So here the subject of the friendship seems to be more the shared interest rather than the friend herself. And it is a coincidence that this person rather than that person is also into horses, and we've come across each other while we were interested in our horses. Some friendships are like that. They're based on a shared interest that we may have, or just a coincidence of where we find ourselves. You find yourself at school or at work, sitting next to a person, maybe they'll become your friend because it just makes sense for you to exchange ideas and develop a friendship, given that in a sense you've been forced in this proximity with each other. It won't happen with everybody, obviously in some cases it won't work at all, but at least in some cases it's slightly coincidental why you become friends with others. Yet at the same time, not all friendships are like that. Hopefully in your discussion, when you paused the video, you thought of at least one friend that you've had who's much more important than everybody else. Here it's not about discussing horses, and it's not about the fact that we happen to sit right next to each other, but it's more about who that person is. And if you try to describe that friend and why that friend is important to you, maybe you came up with things that characterize who they are. Maybe you said things like, this is a very loyal person. Whenever I've needed them, they've been there for me. Or this is a very trustworthy person. I can tell them my secrets and I know they won't tell anybody else. Now we're talking about the person's character. What you like about them is who they are. Now the friend is not interchangeable with anybody else. You like the friend because of who they are, and you know who they are. The relationship is deep and meaningful. This friend cannot be interchanged with somebody else. Now, all the things we said so far tell us something about the conditions of friendship as well, and when friendships end. If I move to a different stable yard, I might change horsey friends. No big deal. If my really important friend turns out to be untrustworthy, if I find out that behind my back they've been texting all my other friends, saying really horrible things about me, making fun of me, and sharing my deepest secrets, then that betrayal of trust is the reason for the end of that friendship. So understanding what kind of friendship we have tells us something about why this friendship started in the first place, what keeps it going, and under what circumstances the friendship ends. Okay, you might be saying now, Nafsika, you said you were going to talk about philosophy, but all you've done is talk about friendship. And perhaps I've only just reiterated the kinds of things that you managed to say by yourselves in the discussions with the people you discussed friendship with when you paused the video. So what is the point of this? It seems irrelevant and very obvious at the same time. Well, the point is this. 2,500 years ago, Greek philosopher Aristotle discussed exactly the same sorts of questions and came up with pretty much the same sort of ideas as you did. He was also interested in friendship because he thought that friendship was at the heart of living a good life. That having friends, the availability of good people who are there to support you in your own development, in your own moral development, was a really important part of what it means to live a good life as a human being. We are social animals, we need other people around us, and we need the support of friendships. So he started thinking about friendships as central to the good life, and that led him to wonder, what are friendships? And that led him to all the kinds of questions that you have been answering also about friendship. Now, the interesting thing is that the connection runs from 2,500 years ago to today. We're having the same kinds of thoughts, and we can feel a link or a sort of connection, I suppose, to what he said at that time and to what we have to say today. For me, that is amazing. This idea that something that was written 2,500 years ago is of such great relevance to us today that we could be coming up with the same ideas and we could be engaging with the ideas of somebody from such a long time ago is absolutely brilliant. And this is part of philosophy, having ideas and connecting them. Thinking about what other people said and what we think in response to these ideas. Now, the reason I made you pause and the reason I made you think about philosophy for yourselves is that it is important what you think. A while ago I had a big problem with my back and I ended up in hospital with emergency surgery, and when I came out I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital until I could show that I could walk a little bit using a cane, so the physiotherapist was seeing me every day. And it was quite painful to walk around the hospital corridors. I didn't go very far, but nonetheless it was extremely painful. And he was trying to distract me, so he was asking me about what I do and what is my profession and so on, to just keep my mind from the pain. And when I said I'm a philosopher, he said, but aren't we all? Now this is in a country where philosophy is taught in high school, so he had no problem recognizing philosophy as something he had been taught, and he had a completely different view on it than the person who's never heard about this discipline. A complete extreme. Philosophy is a conversation killer for people who've never come across it at all, and philosophy is belonging to everybody, for anybody who has studied it before. For my physiotherapist, philosophy was for everyone, and everyone is a philosopher, because philosophy is about thinking. The reason you were able to come up with similar ideas to those of Aristotle 2,500 years ago is because we're both thinking beings. that gives us our biggest clue to what is philosophy. Philosophy comes from the ancient Greek for the love of wisdom. So it is about thinking. The subject matter is not as important as the way we do philosophy. Philosophy is not about facts. It could involve some facts. You know, when I teach undergraduate philosophy students, Immanuel Kant, I teach them 3 formulations of the categorical imperative. As it turns out, in the literature, people expand and argue that there may be as many as 5 formulations of the categorical imperative, and some people argue that there may even be 7 formulations of the categorical imperative. Should you ask me to list the 3, I can do it, because I tend to teach Kant a lot, so I remember them, and sometimes I work on Kant, so these are ideas that are fresh in my mind. If you ask me to list the 5, I'd be in trouble, and there's absolutely no way I could remember the 7 formulations of the categorical imperative. Isn't that terrible for somebody with a PhD in philosophy who teaches philosophy? No, nobody cares. If I've forgotten the 7 formulations, I can open the book, read it again, and figure them out again. Because philosophy is not about facts. Some disciplines are about facts. Maybe history is a lot more about discovering facts and being certain about what happened. Philosophy is more about how we think about things rather than the facts themselves. It doesn't really matter if you don't remember all the formulations, you can go read them again. What is much more interesting is what you think about the formulations of the categorical imperative, how you think about them. In British universities, you can end up doing philosophy in a number of different universities, and you might end up doing completely different topics. It could be that in one university you will study Aristotle, in another they have Plato on the curriculum, and in a third one they have no ancient Greek philosophy at all, they do something else. There are a huge number of subdivisions in philosophy. Anything you can think of, there is a philosophy of. Philosophy of mathematics, biology, psychology. To remember our friend, the psychologist from the beginning, there is a philosophy of what that person does, a philosophy of psychology. There is moral philosophy, political philosophy, legal philosophy, applied ethics, logic. Pretty much anything you can think of, there is a philosophy of. How is that possible? Why isn't there a curriculum for philosophy? If you're a doctor and you graduate from one university, you pretty much know the same sort of things that you would know if you graduated from another university. It would be very weird to say, oh, in our university we didn't do any pathology at all, we just did pharmacology. That wouldn't work for medicine. But it works for philosophy. And the reason it works for philosophy is that we're interested in how you think, and not what you think. The point of philosophy lectures and seminars is not to tell you what to think. Take a contentious issue like abortion. When I teach abortion, I'm not trying to tell people that it should be decriminalized or that the fetus has a certain moral status or not. I'm trying to teach them how to think for themselves through these complex and difficult arguments so that they come to the point where they can evaluate these arguments and think for themselves whether they agree with them or not. The second and third most important words in philosophy are I think. Writing I think or I will argue are really important bits of writing a philosophy essay. I really want to know what you think. This is why it was really important that you paused the video and you thought for yourself, what is friendship? Of course, later on I told you what is friendship, but that is pointless. Anybody can tell you what they think friendship is. The important bit is to know what you think friendship is. And if you didn't pause the video, it's a bit of a shame because you missed out on your own ideas. You only got my ideas. And that's a bit boring, isn't it? Isn't it a lot better for you to have your own ideas? So if you didn't pause the video, and maybe you're interested in seeing another one, next time make sure you absolutely pause the video and do your own work to figure out what you think. So the second and third most important words in philosophy are, I think, don't miss out on that bit, because if you miss out on that and you just hear my views, you're not doing philosophy. I'm doing philosophy, and it's a shame. The first most important word in philosophy is why. No philosophy could be done without the little word why. And this is what connects all these different kinds of philosophy, like the philosophy of time and the philosophy of mathematics and ethics and political philosophy are all joined up by the fact that they ask why questions. There is nothing that is self-evident or obvious in philosophy. You are very lazy as a philosopher if you say, but that's the way it is. Not good enough. In philosophy, everything has to be justified, and anybody has the right to ask you a why question. In this process of trying to justify what you think, you may find that you don't know what you think, that you need to figure it out, or that you think something that doesn't quite work well with all the other things that you think. It's an inconsistency. We'll talk about that in a later video. Or that you think something that you no longer think. It is possible for you to change your view by thinking about it. And this is fundamental to philosophy, because the study of wisdom is the study of thinking. What we do fundamentally in philosophy is reflect and ask why questions on everything. Okay, I'm going to leave you there, and I'll try to come back with 3 introductory videos for those of you who have never studied moral philosophy before. The first one will be on what is moral philosophy and what is the difference between moral philosophy, the law, etiquette and social conventions. The second will be on why should I bother being moral? What's in it for me? And the third one is on relativism. The idea that it's all relative anyway. There is no truth of the matter when it comes to morality. So if you're interested in more philosophy, look out for those videos. Bye bye for now.